Hi everybody, I am Cindy, and did you know that I am Heidi's sister? Yes, we are a sister team that we both volunteer with DNAngels, and I've got a story I just have to share with you. I recently solved a case, and she just gave me an update last night, and this story is one that should be a movie or a book, or actually I think it should be on Dateline because there's still some mystery to it. So this client came to me. She was adopted. She had met Bio Mom several years ago, and Bio Mom did give her a name, and she gave her information on the man that was her father, her bio father. She also told her that he had died in a plane crash. He was a pilot, and he died in a plane crash 5 days after she was born. But the client would still like to meet with other family, find out whether the family's out there, get medical information, all of that. So went to work. We always follow the DNA. We do keep in mind, if we have a name, we look for that name as we're building out the trees using the DNA. I could not find anything that showed her related to this name. I did take it a step further. I always like to do like a reverse search when we have a name to make sure I'm not missing anything, and find them and build the tree out backwards to make sure it's not an NPE or a situation where even though the names aren't the same, they are related. I did find an article where I found the man, the dates, the names, everything matches. He was a pilot. He died in a plane crash 5 days after she was born. So it's a real person, it's a real story, but she had no DNA to this guy. So I went on, continued to work the case. It took a while. The matches weren't that great. It was also a little challenging because she was born in Florida, and all of her matches were in Pennsylvania. So I was trying to figure out how the bio dad got to Florida. I was looking for a Florida connection as I'm building out these trees. I finally was able to figure out grandparents, and they had one son. It was a pretty common name, at least in that area. It was a very common surname, and he had a common first name as well. And to make it more complicated, he was born with one middle name, and he changed it and started using a different middle name. He actually joined the Army and the Air Corps in the Army, and he used a different middle name when he joined the Army and going forward. And there were multiple people with this name that had different middle initials. So it took a while to figure out that these two names were the same guy and not to confuse them with the other people with the same name. But we were able to do that with a lot of research. And the first things I was able to find on him, once I was able to determine who Bio Dad was, I found some articles where he had been in some legal trouble when he was in his early 20s. And found a couple of those where he had evidently been sentenced and done some time. And but he then later joined the Army. And then I couldn't find anything else on him that I knew was him. I found lots of articles about guys with this name, but based off of the records I could find, they weren't the same person, our bio dad. So search and search, widened my net out, went to some other resources that I don't automatically go to right away, and I was able to find an article in the paper. It was in a Pennsylvania paper that said there was a pilot that went missing, and he had the same name. And the story was that he was delivering a crop duster to Mexico City, and he never made it. And he's been missing. At that point, it had been like 2 weeks. And it said that he was last heard from when he called home from this city in Florida, which is where the client was born. So I knew we had our man, and that was our connection to Florida. So I'm like, okay, we found our guy. We found how he met Mom, but what happened to him? So I searched records high and low. I could not find, the only other record I found after that he went missing was a filing for divorce from, evidently he had been married, couldn't find marriage records, and the divorce was filed in the first name and then her married name, so that wasn't very helpful. But it said divorce for indignities and desertion. So I'm like, well, is it desertion because he went missing 2 years ago? So I couldn't find anything where he was declared dead. I couldn't find anything where he was found. You would think they had several articles in the paper about him missing, so you would think they would have had some follow-up articles, but nothing was found. I even searched Mexico to see if I could find any articles where if he was found in Mexico territory, pronounced dead in Mexico. Couldn't find anything. Then I also started looking for records for living records. So if he did make it back and he survived, he should have some kind of records after that date. And I couldn't find anything. Either way, I couldn't find anything to prove he was alive. I couldn't find anything to prove he was dead. There was just like he was a ghost. He just disappeared. And so I had to give that information to the client. The closest relatives to the client were 2 cousins. Bio dad had a sister who had also passed, but she had 2 daughters, so I gave her their information. So she updated me last night that she made contact with one of the cousins, and I was like, oh, that's awesome. What do they know about dad? And she said that they think he faked his death. I'm like, okay. I even said to her when I was giving her the updates, I'm like, I don't know if he just went off the grid, if he's just never found, but I can't find anything one or the other. So they think he faked his death. They said that he was a very adventurous man. The other thing I didn't tell you is there was her matches weren't that good, but there was one top match that was a half-sister match. And it was very frustrating because the name was a very common name. It was like Ann B66. There was no other information, and she hadn't been online in over a year. She wasn't reading her messages. She had no location. She had no age range, nothing. I sent emails to every MB66 I could find with no responses, and that was very frustrating because I'm like, you have a half-sister out there. Well, her cousin knows is a half-sister. They were able to connect years ago, and the half-sister is a half-sister because dad was also a traveling stunt show car guy, and he had gotten injured, so instead of doing the stunts, he was going ahead of the shows, promoting them in the small towns. And in one of those small towns, he met up with Ann's mom, and therefore he's Ann's father. So I just think it's really coincidental that mom gave her a name of a guy that did die in a plane crash 5 days after she was born, but that's not dad. Dad's a different guy who was a pilot that disappeared, and this was about 3 years after she was born. So what do you think of this story? Do you think mom purposely gave her the name of a different guy with a similar story so she wouldn't look for her real bio dad? Or do you think she just liked pilots and maybe didn't know? What do you think about this story? I think it's amazing. I think we need to call Dateline and have them solve the mystery for us, figure out where this guy really is and if he died or if he continued living long after. Tell me your thoughts.